Well, Dr. Thomas did an excellent job of explaining the protocols, and here to give a little bit more information on the estrus synchronization protocols and how to put them into action is Dr. Sandy Johnson. Sandy's been a member of the task force, I think, since the inception of it, and really a leader of this program. And she's done a lot of excellent work with synchronization planners. And let's welcome Dr. Johnson to the speaker.
Well, good morning. It's great to see everyone here, and really appreciate the efforts of the Nebraska crew to organize this and make a nice venue for us. And we all know it takes a lot of work to bring a lot of people to your backyard and get things done, so we appreciate that. So my job is to talk about planning, and oftentimes we think of planning as just being, we're planning synchronization programs. It might be just a month or so before we're starting to breed those cows. And what I want to make sure and impress on you is that I think that planning the month or so before, while very important, should not be overlooked by the planning that really occurs year-round. We, in order to get the type of results that Jordan was sharing, we need to think about this as a year-round process, a system. And so I want to just, as I visit with you today, talk a little bit about the system we're working with and understanding that system, and think of this a little bit like, before our athletes go out to perform, they do some warm-up exercises. So this is kind of your warm-up exercises, maybe reminding you of things you know, but putting them in a context as we think about this planning. So we have this system that we're trying to use the forages that we have, and we're working with that annual cycle of forage production. We've decided when we should target our time of calving and breeding based on what that environment is. And so given that 365 days a year and general gestation length, that leaves us about 80 days to get that cow rebred. Now, if you're dealing with a little more Bosindicus breeding, those dates are slightly different. But essentially, that's the system that we're working with, okay? And strictly math is determining that system, right? There's not much we're going to control about the days in the year or the length of gestation. So because Mike Smith is here, I must talk about the postpartum interval. I think be disappointed, but we know that's a key factor in this whole process of getting cows rebred. They're pregnant for a period of time, they calve, and before they start cycling again, there's a number of things that impacts that timing before they return to have that first normal estrus cycle. Younger cows take longer than mature cows. If they have calving difficulty, they're going to take longer. If there's a calf suckling, it's going to take longer. But probably the biggest driver that we have control over then is nutrition. And so we need to recognize that how we time those nutrients, and there'll be other people talk about those more in depth, but that's a large tool for us to use. And that tool also comes with a price tag. So we want to apply enough, but we don't want to spend too much money. So that becomes a little bit of a fine line as we fine tune these systems. With the price of calves right now, maybe you're not as concerned about the cost of feed, but my guess is that the current prices won't be here forever. So if we think about this group of cows, they're all not going to calve on the same day. They're going to be different places and different times. And so when we apply a breeding season to them, Some might be cycling and some might be not, based on all those factors that we talked about. And we know that synchronization then can help more of those cows be ready or have their first chance to conceive the first day of the breeding season. And that's the great thing about synchronization, whether or not you use artificial insemination or not. So we want to try and optimize those number of opportunities for them to be bred during the course of the breeding season. Now, this table helps us look at a couple different concepts. Across the top, we have different hypothetical postpartum intervals from 60 to 120 days. And then I just took a group of the data set that I had, looked at the average postpartum interval when they would normally start breeding, and those that calved in the first 21 days, the second 21 days, third, and so on. And then said, based on the length of those postpartum intervals, how many opportunities would they have to conceive in a 60-day period? So if they have a short postpartum interval, they have lots of opportunities to cycle during the 60-day breeding period, right? That would be typical of many of our cows. If we think about young females, 2-year-olds are going to have a longer postpartum interval anyway, and if our nutrition is not just right, it could get much longer. And so what we see that just numerically, the chances of those animals with a long postpartum interval conceiving is much just mathematically reduced without any additional help or synchronization in those later calving individuals. So a couple of messages here. We think about the value of a short breeding period for those yearling heifers, kind of takes out a lot of these concerns, long postpartum interval with later calving individuals. And then just appreciating the effect that, nutrition is going to be a key driver in the length of that postpartum interval. And so I just like to make sure that we understand the system we're working with and some of the limitations that are there. Likewise, we select a calving date and a breeding date, and our bull turnout, weaning dates may vary. But I think the thing that we don't often think about is when this third trimester starts, because we know at that period that calf is going to start gaining much more rapidly, and that cow needs to gain about 150 pounds or better between the weight of the fetus and the fluid. And if we're not helping her gain that weight, she's essentially taking that condition off herself. And so in where I am at in Western Kansas, and I see corn harvest can overcome thoughts about what we're doing with cows at times. And if you ask people when the third trimester starts, most people are like, have to do a little figuring to come up with that. And I would suggest if you want to improve your reproductive response in the spring calving system, you need to think a little bit more about where that occurs and how you're helping that cow. So I always encourage people to not just rely on memory, and maybe that's because my memory is no longer what I think it was when I was younger. I need to write things down, whether it's the grocery list, but I would say that even though we see cows every day, it may not really sink into us if we're seeing a change in condition. Just like when you're seeing some relatives, youngsters that, my, how you've grown. Somebody probably told you that at some point in time. We don't notice it when we see it every day, when we've gone for a while and come back. So if we don't intentionally record body condition score and take time to actually look at our calving distribution, I think we're missing an opportunity to learn more about our system. If we're calculating our calving distribution, I like you to start with the third calf that's born. I like to look at heifers separately from mature cows, and you may want to look at 3-year-olds as a separate group. It's really your scorecard of how you did feeding those animals up to that point. A lot of times we think we have to run a cow through a chute to do a body condition score, and you certainly can do it that way. But you can also train yourself to, when you're riding, walking, however you're moving through those cows, and you may need a driver because even if you're on a horse and steering with your legs, you might lose your reins. That hasn't happened to me ever, but anyway, if you want to make a notation of how many animals you see of various condition scores. So as you're moving through those animals, here's a 4, here's a 5. It wouldn't matter if you miss some, okay, as long as you're doing more than, if there's 3, you're going to get them all, okay? If there's 100 and you miss 5 of them, you're still going to see the idea of what that herd is in terms of body condition score. So just take that time, write it down. We try and use these tools to remind people to do that. There's nothing magic about it, but just simply a reminder to do it. I would use that to help me decide when I'm going to wean. I want to make sure I know what their condition score is at the start of the 3rd trimester. I look at them at the start of calving, because again, I'm assessing my past nutrition, and then at the start of the breeding season. All those things would help me know more about my nutrition program and how well my cows respond for reproductive response. So one of the questions we get often is, how soon can we start breeding cows after calving? And my interpretation of their question is maybe they're doing a little bit of picking and choosing. And so I like to share this data set that kind of looks at the number of cows that were cycling prior to the start of the breeding season. And they're grouped by 10-day periods here. And you see a pretty good drop off between, this is 40 days and greater, and here we're 31 to 40 days. And of course, the bulk of these cows are longer. Notice that the ones that have calved the longest, we actually see fewer cycling, and that's because this bar actually represents the number of 2-year-olds. So generally our recommendation then, if you're thinking about those late calving cows, or you're going to include them, is probably to use that short-term seeder as your tool to help them try to start cycling. And then in my mind, if they're 21 days, at least by the time I'm going to put that seeder in, and they're about 30 days at the time that I breed them, they're worth the effort trying to get them bred. And you don't have to use the highest cost semen for this shorter term postpartum cow. It's an opportunity to try and catch her up, and a lot of times you can. And so we know that we're going to get our better response in those cows that are in excellent body condition and 45 days plus. All right, we talked about the recommendations that have come from the task force, and what I want to make sure that you look for is we do date them. And as Jordan mentioned, we will be updating those for 2006, but make sure you are looking at our most recent recommendations, because that, as we gather more data, we try to give you the most current recommendations from what we're seeing. Okay, in terms of products, and I think Rick touched on this, but essentially we feel like these are equally effective regardless of the manufacturer. It is important to notice different doses for various products. The main thing is to give the right product on the right day, okay, and use them at the label dose and follow BQA guidelines for doing that. I want to remind you that when handling prostaglandins, they can be absorbed through the skin, so you should recommend that you wear gloves. Can affect, obviously, women of childbearing age, but also asthmatics and others with bronchial issues. So just a little safety reminder, we expose ourselves to a lot of things when we're working cows, and we need to take care of the people that were working with us. Now, another common question we get, what's the best protocol for X, Y, or Z? And the answer to that generally is going to vary with the situation, which it always makes us hard to, without you telling us more specifically what your situation is, it's hard to, we need to know more to answer that. But what we've tried to do in these recommendations is, for the most part, these are, if you can apply the protocol correctly, generally consider them relatively equally effective. But there are certainly situations where certain protocols would work better than others. And so, if you want the protocol recommendation, we can talk about your specific situation, but a lot of times if you select from within the category and what you can get done, it is often going to get you there. So we have cow protocols. I'm showing the heat detection and timed AI. We have fixed timed AI protocols, different sheet for the heifers. Often the timing is a little bit different for heifers, and I believe Jordan pointed some of that out. So the very important thing then about applying these recipes is getting the recipe applied correctly. So I think it was probably in 2004 when we were here that Daryl Strobing said, well, we need to work with you on our synchronization planner and incorporate all these recommendations, because that was when that was all coming together. And so the original estrus synchronization planner is here. I want you to note that it's dated, and we want you to be using the most recent copy. Occasionally we find some errors that creep in, but the main thing that we want to be able to help you do is get the right thing done on the right day and develop a plan and a calendar to do that. So what you need to know is now that we have multiple versions. So this is the original version, and I'm going to discuss the differences here in a second. We have the multi-group version. I hope you appreciate the really catchy name we use there, multi-group, so you can put cows and heifers on the same calendar. All right. The folks in the Southeast developed a mobile version a number of years ago at estrussync.com. And then we are very near to completing and making this available to you is another web-based version that will be housed on the beefrepro.info website. And so if we want to look at the differences between those, what I want you to note is that essentially we have the ability to update all except this, the estrussync.com. Now, if you need MGA prostaglandin, 7-day co-sync, can still do that fine for you. Some of the more recent things are not there. The ones from the Iowa State, the original one and the multi-group are Excel-based. We have printable calendars with both the new app and the Excel-based versions. But I want you to note that all the green checks come with this multi-group version. That's where we've been able to put the most of the tools. So if you were breeding 2 groups of heifers and 1 group of cows, you could easily put those on one calendar. You could add when you're going to reprotract score, preg check, or you could use it for recipients. Here's the synchronization protocol. This is the date somebody's coming to put in embryos. Those are not options that we have with the other tools right now. You can do a cost comparison with the 2 Excel-based versions. The multi-group also does calculates the amount of supplies you need. Sometimes I have trouble if I'm giving 2 injections of GnRH, I may not be able to multiply the number of cows times 2 and get enough GnRH. It just happens to me. I know it wouldn't happen to you, but it's always helpful to have all the supplies you need on hand. And then the other thing that both the Excel-based versions have are just some helpful hints of if you have any questions about how is this defined or what does this mean, we have the most control there. All right, so we'll take a quick look at this new synchronization planner version online. If you want to scan that QR code and put your email address in there, I will message you when that is available. So this is the first screen, and you would essentially, select cow or heifer, Bos indicus, Bos taurus, so on. Doesn't quite show it all to you there. But this is how it would look on your phone. Obviously, you'd have to scroll down to see more. Then you would simply select one of those protocols. Once you highlight that protocol, then you get information about what happens on each of those days. And then notice you can send this to your Outlook, Yahoo, Google Calendar, and actually this was the functionality we were trying to get to put those dates on your calendar. Now the calendar doesn't look as great on your phone, but it does look fine on a big screen, but the idea in this case, you're strictly using on your phone, you could send that iCal file and add it to your list. So I think an important thing as we think about planning is it's rarely just one person that's involved in the synchronization and AI's planning and protocol. We got to get everybody on the right page. How many days do we actually feed MGA? What day are we going to do this? Does it work on everybody's calendar? We have lots of things going on. So getting the schedule out there and communicating it effectively is a big deal. And so it seems simple, but we routinely get calls, well, this didn't happen, now what do we do? Okay, so we work from there. Okay, so the planner in the Excel version is just kind of set up to walk you through choices and guide you to what these recommended protocols are, gives you a warning list if you're not on there. I want to just highlight the multi-group version. This is just illustrating, we make those selections for however many, you can go up to 12 groups of animals. If you use a multi-group version, I would recommend to watch this little video. I'm going to show you a link in a minute, but you need to learn one additional step about using that does not apply to those other tools. And then again, the other nice thing, you can add additional tasks. Again, this would work for somebody with embryo recipients or cows that you're going to flush, because you can add in those additional steps. Now we get the question, why don't we have something for setting up ET cows? And if we could ever get some agreement on what that setup procedure might be, well, we might think about that, but I think there's not, we don't have that clarity. All right, so you can find these tools on the Iowa Beef Center, or if you look on our beefrepro.org under resources, there'll be links back to the Iowa Beef Center, and this will also be where there will be a link to that new app that we'll have. Garland, what do we call that? We're going to call it, yeah. We got to come up with a better term so that Sandy can talk to you clearly, but we're going to call it something. All right, so just to try to wind up then, I want you to think about, the time we do synchronization in AI is just a small time during the year. We've got to be planning year-round for success. I think tracking those things like body condition score and calving distribution tells us how we were doing. Obviously, we're interested in that AI conception rate that's tied to that calving distribution, but we need to see the full picture to really use that information. We hope you'll use the planner to help you get the right thing done on the right day. We can't get our GnRH and prostaglandin products mixed up. You need the right product in the right day and the right time. And we hope that helps you work with your crew for success. I'll just leave that QR code up there. for a moment as I'm winding up here, but appreciate the opportunity. If you're ever using the planner and run into, if you see something that you don't think is right, occasionally things happen. We don't have the right thing, so please do ask. My contact and Garland's are both there, and do want to recognize Garland Dalkey. He's up here in the front. He is the computer whiz that's has made the planner go for a number of years, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to work with him on that. So with that, I will turn it back to Don.